before we break down the four downs, I just want to get into the general topic, Caleb, and that is, do you think that baseball or women's basketball is a bigger factor in terms of helping Tennessee's athletic department through exposure, which then helps Tennessee's football team?
Women's basketball. I hardcore believe that it's women's basketball. I'm pretty strong on that women's basketball matters more than baseball for Tennessee.
See, I don't think so, because at the end of the day, I think there are going to be some people who just don't follow women's sports. And I'm not saying you should or shouldn't. That's up to you. But males are the better of the athletes, the two genders. And I think
yes, but there's also a lot of people, particularly younger people, who just don't follow baseball, period.
It's true. That's true.
I mean, it's such a dying sport.
It does tend to take over, though, at times. I'll find myself watching it. If you go to a sports bar or restaurant, it's always on. Especially Tennessee suddenly has something to do for students that might be on campus during the summer, bands that want to come out. I mean, they're selling that thing out. Women's basketball had, if we're talking Pat Summitt, yes, bigger impact. She transcended the sport. She transcended all sports. But right now, I think it's baseball. I think they'd rather have them be successful and get the exposure for the football team as opposed to Tennessee's women's basketball program. I'm flipped on that. I think it's the complete other side.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the thing. Here's what I'll give you. The College World Series has done a better marketing job to make it a more valuable, like, who doesn't want to go to that? It looks like the most fun thing in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm not going to take anything away from that. I guess where I'm landing is, and we talked about this yesterday, 90% of why you'd want to go to the College World Series is to not even watch the games, honestly. Like, whereas women's basketball it's in March, it's tied to the men's NCAA tournament. If you're watching it, you're actually watching it. So I think that's where the difference becomes. And that's why I think Tennessee would much rather be elite in women's basketball. But we're putting up the poll question right now, and we'll see what people say. Because, again, I'm not the traditionalist that everybody else. Well, I am actually a traditionalist, but I understand when there's a need to let it go. But if you're a traditionalist, you're picking the Lady Vols over baseball, right?
Yeah. Now I will tell this story again, because I've told it before, so I apologize if you don't want to hear it again. But here it goes. Terry Fair, who I did a show with for a year, he only was interested in Tennessee because of the women's basketball program that he saw when he was a junior or senior in high school out in Arizona. They don't get Terry Fair if not for Tennessee's women's basketball program. So this stuff does matter. These are non-revenue sports. So at the end of the day, the ledger sheet doesn't reflect it, but they do matter in terms of building a program.
Oh, yeah, they absolutely matter in terms of building a program. They also complicate things a little bit because if one program's successful, they're going to start to fight and ask for more funding than maybe they should get. And that's when all of a sudden the fight happens a little bit. And so we're going to see how that works. But I think also you have to remember in Tennessee's case specifically, women's basketball has a very unique fan base that it's got its own entire demographic of fans that is just totally different from the rest of the athletic program at Tennessee.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, there are people that only follow Tennessee women's basketball.
This is true.
And don't give two you-know-whats about the football or men's basketball or baseball programs.
There are some that are even resentful because the football program gets so much support, which it should. Again, it's your revenue sport. I don't care if you win 80 national championships and have the greatest coach ever, which Tennessee arguably did with Pat Summitt. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you've got to throw more at football, don't you? I don't care how successful the women's basketball program.
Yeah, no, you have to throw more at football. Football's. I mean, Fulmer used to say football's the engine that drives the train. The other sports matter, but football's the engine that drives the train. It ain't just the engine. Okay, football is like, I don't know, Dave, you're more of a car guy than I am. I'm not much of a car guy, but football's like 5 different parts of a car, including the engine, before you get to something else, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Now, Orange Blood, I think, misread me. He said, Dave, I'm not sure you can compare the collegiate sports environment from 30 years ago to this era. No, I was just making the point that you do get promotion that helps football through other sports. He went on to say the appeal nowadays is more driven by baseball and men's basketball, in my opinion. I agree. Caleb, you take issue with orange blood. I think he may have quoted me instead of you, but you're the one that's arguing women's basketball.
Here's the point. Here's one of the things that's relevant. And Dave, you talked about this with, the college football playoff and the SEC and ESPN. Baseball actually as a game probably draws more ratings than women's basketball. But what sport's more likely to be a narrative on the talk shows during the day? Women's basketball. I
Well,
mean,
I will give you that.
yeah. Yeah. And so part of this is, I mean, it's the same with like something like hockey. The NHL, big draw, great for fans. It's not a great sport to talk about. I know that's weird to say, but it's like, it's harder to it's very easy to manufacture women's basketball debates. Is this player or this player better? You know what I mean? It's like it's not as easy for baseball or hockey in that regard. So women's basketball drives narratives, and if you're not a revenue sport, driving the narrative is, I mean, wouldn't you rather see Tennessee be talked about on, First Take or Pardon the Interruption or whatever? What's more likely to get them talked about on that regularly? Having an elite talent in women's basketball or having an elite talent in baseball? Who in baseball has generated the coverage Caitlin Clark's generated the last 2 years?
And I want to give you this, Caleb. I'm going to support your argument, even though I disagree with it. The College World Series gets about 1.6 million or so viewers, whereas the national championship game between UConn and South Carolina got about 8.6 million viewers. That's a significant difference.
That is a huge difference. You're right. That's a huge difference. So,
but again, I think though that when you're talking about Pat Summitt the 30 years ago, I think that you're talking about somebody that absolutely transcended the sport. All right, Four Downs brought to you now by our fantastic friends that are just right down the road on Parkside Drive and Kingston Pike. It is Four Downs brought to you by Ted Russell Ford Lincoln as we broadcast live from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln studios. Coop, what should people do? Coop.
Cooper Mays here. Hit like and subscribe.
There we go.
Coop here. First down.
All right, first down revenue. Well, neither sport's making money.
right. But I'm saying, should that be a factor in where Tennessee invests more money? How about that? If they're both losing money, is the question, how much are they losing? My understanding, and I could be wrong on this, more than me, but my understanding that Lady Vols are at least revenue neutral, aren't they?
The last I checked, they lost about $1 million a year that the football team would write a check for, so they did look revenue neutral.
Oh, okay. So it's a little bit different in the reporting numbers of that. Last year, Tennessee's baseball
there was definitely some magic books going on. Let's put it that way.
Okay, that's fair. So last year, Tennessee's baseball program generated over 4.3 million in revenue. Now that doesn't include expenses, so we have no idea how much it costs to, for the baseball program to be effective. But the Tennessee women's basketball program generated straight at 4 million in revenue. Now
remember this too: you throw money at women's basketball, who else benefits? It's men's basketball. So they're redoing, I don't know if you know this, but they're redoing a good portion of Thompson Bowling Arena, and it's going to benefit the men's program as well. So you throw money at baseball, but there's a separate softball stadium. So that doesn't help any other sport.
Right, that's true. You're right. That's a very good point. And which is super relevant for what we're talking about here. So as far as I'm aware, I can't pull this up exactly, but Tennessee's women's basketball program did operate at a deficit in fiscal year 2024. And so with that, I would just venture to say, just up front, Tennessee baseball, let's just say, is slightly better on revenue now. But would that continue with other factors, which we'll get to? Because we also know that Tennessee baseball slightly better in revenue than women's basketball. But Tennessee baseball is also in the midst of a generational historic run, and the women's basketball program was as down as it has ever been in history last year.
True. Oh,
Cooper Mays here. Second down.
What's second down?
Historic prestige, should that matter?
I don't know that And we're talking about helping.
Now we know which one wins in historic prestige. Obviously,
Right.
Lady Vols.
We're talking about 17-year-old kids because we're talking about football recruiting essentially.
Yep.
It's been a long time since Pat Summitt's been the head coach. You and I remember her well. I don't know that it's impactful like it was in the Terry Fair situation.
No, but at the same time, that historic prestige is why Candace Parker is all over every single TV show possible and gets to go on Inside the NBA and just she's such a face of women's basketball. Now, is she as big of a face as Elisa Leslie was, or like a Sue Bird or Rebecca Lobo now talking on ESPN? I don't know, but I will say Candace Parker, the prestige is why Candace Parker is so famous.
Yes, agreed. Boy, she is gorgeous in person, just for the record. You ever stood next to her? I mean,
yes, actually I have. Yeah, no, she's
striking.
She is really
And
hot.
I'm not judging her on her looks. I think she's an incredible basketball analyst as well. She's just all around a pretty good person.
Tennessee center Cooper Mays here. Third down.
What's third down, Caleb?
Third down, recent success. Now, baseball wins. How much of a factor is that? Because you know this, Dave, and one of the rules of investing in business is don't overreact to recent success, right?
Well, I'm not going to overreact, but I think it's a factor. I think seeing them in the College World Series, I think is a big factor.
I agree. I think that matters. I think that it doesn't outweigh revenue, but I think it does matter.
Well, you have to factor this in as well. If the women's basketball program flames out in the first round of the NCAA tournament and the baseball program goes to the College World Series, I mean, it depends the success level that each program has as to how much exposure they will then have.
Right. Which is why I think baseball is generating more revenue right now, is because the success baseball's had has been leaps and bounds better than women's basketball. But the recent success, we have to say that, yes, baseball wins, and baseball wins pretty significantly, which is why it's worth a vote. To say that, okay, you spend more on baseball because, I mean, basically put it this way, Dave. If you're Danny White and you're determining how to spend this money, do you just reward the sport that's been more productive? Like, do you say baseball's been better recently? They've earned the right to get more money.
Go off the rails a little bit. You want to read Steve's comment?
Steve watches women's volleyball. Those shorts do
it. All SEC center Cooper Mays here. Fourth down.
What's fourth down?
Fourth down is future success.
I don't know where you're going with this one. That's why I wanted you to read it.
I think the Lady Vols have baseball beaten future success as good as I think the baseball program is with Tony Vitello.
Oh, come on, Caleb.
The Lady Vols have the best coaching hire in women's basketball right now in Kim Caldwell, who is running the most entertaining system out there that has not been tested at this level.
Whoa.
Would, if you brought me Dawn Staley, Gina Auriemma,
she was created in a lab.
Now, I'm not saying that she wasn't for Tennessee, funny enough, but if you put Dawn Staley, Kim Caldwell, and Gina Auriemma in front of me and said I have to pick a coach, I'm picking Kim Caldwell right now. She's running a perfect system. She is loading up on talent. She's got the #1 recruiting class coming in, the most entertaining women's basketball team you'll ever watch. Okay, they are a draw. And baseball is such a crapshoot, Dave. You know this, Dave. Baseball is such a crapshoot. You can be the #1 seed in the NCAA tournament every single year and lose every single year. I mean, it is not crazy for by far the best team to constantly lose. You don't know yet if Tennessee baseball will just be like the Braves were in the 90s and the 2000s, where they won the division every single year. They had the best team at least 5 of those times, and they got 1 World Series out of it.
Well, that very well could happen because of the silliness of the postseason, the way it's set up.
Exactly. It's not the same with the women's basketball NCAA tournament. You have the best team. Chances are you're winning it all. And Kim Caldwell, in a year or two, is likely to have the best team in women's basketball.
Man, why is everybody talking about volleyball players in their shorts? I mean, what if Quincy Calhoun was listening? That would be awful. Caleb, you don't want to present that to your family, the short shorts that volleyball players wear. Why do they have to be so short for the record?
I have no idea. I have no idea what the volleyball program.
Woefully short.